My name is Karen Hesse Smith, and I represent single-member District 5, which is Greater Santa Rita, including the area over near ASU and up north toward the Loop. It also extends to the west and south down by the stadium and over to Knickerbocker. I actually am not entirely sure. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 years. I was born here, grew up here, went to high school here, did part of my college work here, and have been back for a little over a decade since my daughter started third grade here. So. I started university at St. John's in Santa Fe, which is a great books-oriented program. I spent 1 year there, did a short time in Angelo State University, about 1.5 years, and then from Angelo State finished my bachelor's degree in anthropology with a minor in linguistics at the University of Texas in Austin. Then began graduate school at the University of Texas in architecture and urban design, and finished at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I had a director level job with a retail company and traveled all over the United States for that. My base was in Santa Barbara, California, but I lived in Boulder County, Colorado. And prior to that, I worked as an architect and city planner, mostly in New Mexico, but in also multiple locations worldwide. I think of interest to the citizens of San Angelo is probably my background in architecture and urban design. And I did a variety of work in those two related fields, including housing of all sorts, both private homes, low income, mid income, high density, low density, and in addition, urban design around the world, actually. So I think that informs everything that I do and how I see our own city. It's important to note that I grew up in a house that my great-grandparents built, which I think is interesting and unusual in these times when we live in such a mobile society. My mother still lives in that house, and so we have a special relationship with this city, and of course, indeed, I do love it and value the sense of neighborhood and community that engenders, although it's absolutely true that when I was a teenager, like every teenager, I wanted to see the world and was fortunate enough to be able to do that. But in the end, the best thing to do was to come home. I was reluctant at first, honestly, because I have always perceived myself to be reserved and not terribly outgoing. I was the person in the back of the room, not in the front of the room, typically. However, I began to think that maybe that was a good thing, because the person in the back of the room is usually a good listener and a studier, and I consider myself both of those things. And I have found that the initial reluctance was maybe not worth worrying about, because now sitting in that esteemed group is quite an extraordinary experience, and it is a lot of responsibility, but it's interesting literally every single day. My district is very concerned with preservation of the neighborhood feel, because my neighborhood includes one of the oldest residential areas in San Angelo. I am fortunate to have a very involved constituency, and their concerns are frequently communicated to me, their opinions are communicated to me, but that's a good thing. I think that we need a populace that is sufficiently involved to take action, to speak to their council person, to attend meetings, to let their feelings be known. It makes my job much easier, because my job is, after all, to represent their interests. am unique on the council at this point in time with the currently serving members to have had a background that encompasses city planning, strategic planning, master planning, in addition to the architecture and urban design part. The larger pieces of that are of value when you consider decision making at the community level. I think that's important. The business background always serves an individual well because so much of what you have to deal with is business related. The city indeed is run as a business with budgets and concerns and issues that we are asked to have an opinion on. So in order to feel competent at that's where the more reserved personality type maybe has served me well, because I was so concerned that I would be up to the task that I spend a lot of time studying, talking to people, learning, being out in the community, talking to people so that I feel as confident as I possibly can. Everyone wants to be heard, and everyone should be heard. The role of a council person is not to be the boss of anybody, the king or queen of anyone. The role, in my opinion, is to understand the mood or the personality of your district and to represent that in the city at large. But more than that, when I say people want to be heard and people deserve to be heard, you don't ever want to make someone feel that their opinion isn't valuable. So I can't answer every phone call. Sometimes I miss them, but I do call people back. I answer letters, I answer emails, I answer texts. I have visited people at their businesses and at their homes to hear what they have to say to me, and they are always invited to express themselves. I'm hopeful that in the time that I am able to serve as a council representative, that San Angelo will be the proud owner of its first ever landscape ordinance. We've never had such a thing. I think it's past time that we have that. I also am proud to say that I'm part of a group that is working to bring the city of San Angelo in compliance with the Americans for Disabilities Act. That's been in place. The federal law was passed in 1993. Also, definitely time for that. I hope that we can take another concerted look at the strategic and master plans of the city so that we are planning ahead and planning for our children and our grandchildren to have the larger view, not just the view that's immediately in front of us, despite the fact that there have been some very controversial referendums and agenda items in these past 10 months. We still are charged with and must take the responsibility for having that larger view. We've spent a lot of time in this interview discussing what my priorities are and why I think it's important for people to come forward with their opinions and their thoughts on how the city should be run, how the city should look, and on crucial issues, how they feel about those issues and how they would like for us to represent them. One of the best ways to be informed as a city council person is to attend the multitude of meetings. You can be selective, of course. You may not be able to attend them all, but to attend as many as you can of the meetings that are possible for you to visit. In those meetings, you can learn about all manner of things: parks, recreation, city planning. If you want to have your finger on the pulse of what's really happening, it's happening in those places before it ever gets to city council. Frequently, the citizen sees us at city council either on the air or in a recording or live in person, and they think that we are just sitting down, hearing something and voting, when in fact that's not accurate. There are many, 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 many behind the scenes steps before we ever sit down in those chairs and address those issues. We have been educating ourselves using the multitude of opportunities that are available to us and to you as well as a citizen.